Welcome, everybody, to this IANA webinar, part of the Intermodal Connect series, and the last of a set of 4 that we are doing with the Tenny Group. Today, we're wrapping up 4 in the series. This is 9 differentiators that separate acquisitions, winners and losers. Great topic, and I think it really culminates the flow of the topics that we've covered over the year. So with that, I am going to turn it over to my friends Davis and Spencer. Let them introduce themselves, introduce Tenny Group a little bit, and then jump right in.
I appreciate it, Hal. Well, everybody, thanks for being with us. My name is Davis Looney, and I'm the Director of Business Development for the Tenny Group. We also have Spencer Tenny, our President and CEO. We are a transportation specialized M&A advisory firm based in Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville. All we do is M&A within the trucking logistics space, and we're going to try and take some of the lessons that we've learned over the years and bring them into this presentation. And so with that, I'll pass it over to Spencer, and you can take us into the deal.
I'd be happy to, Davis. And for those of you that are not familiar with Davis, he says Director of Business Development. What that really means is that he's the guy that has taken our friends in the industry, buyers, sellers, and influencers and whatnot, taking them out duck hunting and fishing and doing a lot of things that to me really have nothing to do with what we do, and somehow he gets paid for that. So he might be a guy to know moving forward. I'm very excited about this topic today. In full transparency, I don't really consider myself to be a genius or an original or anything like that, but I am a pretty good observer. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Tenny Group, we've been doing M&A advisory work in this space for the last 50 years. And for the last 20 years, I've been personally at the table with the best of the best acquirers in the transportation and logistics space. And, what I've observed over that period of time is that the most elite, the most prolific people that are growing through acquisition, that are solving problems through creative growth strategies, they're really not original either. They're not particularly innovative. And what they do is not that complex. What they do is the right things at the right time, all the time. And I think that kind of gets into what we're talking about today. 9 differentiators that separate acquisition winners and losers. Heading into where we're at right now, potential economic headwinds, 2 years of record M&A activity, all kinds of constraints on organic growth. Without question, there's going to be continued pressure to evolve as business owners. And we're going to make the case today that if you're not integrating acquisitions into your overall growth strategy in some capacity, it's going to be kind of like fighting a battle with one arm tied behind your back. The good news is that this is a learnable skill. And I think that once we kind of go through what we have here, I think that you'll be encouraged, empowered, and hopefully very excited about what you can do here. So with that as a framework, let's jump into differentiator number 1. So a great friend of mine, his name's John. I've been in this industry, multi-generational guy. He comes up to me not that long ago. He says, "Hey, Spencer, thought about this a lot. Thinking about my vision. I want to go from 400 trucks to 700 trucks over the next 4 years. You're my guy. I've been watching these dang webinars and speeches for years. Let's go get this thing done. Giddy up. Let's go do it." And I said, "John, hey, listen, I love the enthusiasm. Just pause there for a minute. Ask you a question. How is your life going to get better when you have 700 trucks?" Now, I asked him this because I know I've seen this movie. It's very easy to just kind of get on adrenaline to go out and get in the game of acquisitions without a plan, without a strategy. That can be an expensive learning lessons. Some people, they look at 50 deals, never acquire anything. You'd be better off not doing anything. So that's my reasoning. I said, "Hey, listen, how's that going to make your life better?" He says, "I don't know. I just like trucks." And so at that point, I began unpacking what I just described about, hey, this is probably a great thing to do, but there's a sequence and there's a preparation that we need to do before we kind of jump in and start having real deal conversations. He paused for a moment. He said, "I'll be right back." He goes into his office. He's a very religious, very strong man of faith. And so he comes back with his Bible and he reads this passage to me. And it's from Luke. And he says, "Who of you who wants to build a tower does not first sit down and calculate the cost to ensure that you have enough to complete it. It was at that moment that I understood John was beginning to understand and apply this differentiating principle, which is to count the cost before you build. So from that point, we knew that, okay, before we can go buy Tower 2, we have to know a few things about Tower 1, which is we got to understand what is the business worth right now, so we don't go out and acquire something that is not accretive. It might be dilutive. We need to understand about his funding mechanism. So we can move to that next slide. We'll hit up some of these things. But also we've got to quantify the cost of action versus inaction. He was very sensitive to the fact of what not acquiring another company was costing him right now because of all of the prices that were rising. He had no ability to offset those. So through this educational process, we're helping him know himself. We're helping him understand what type of strategy would work. We're understanding the funding resources. And I think this is a big deal because once you understand all of the tools in your toolkit that are available to you, it helps mold the potential profile of the company that we're going to go acquire. So available capital on hand, potential seller financing, equipment financing, maybe stock that you're able to exchange to or pass on to or make available to the seller. All these things are on the table as possible sources that we can use to get deals done. So we have the goals, and once we dug in here, we actually uncovered what's the real motivation or the why. And for John, he was very passionate about impacting others. He had a ministry that was local. He said, hey, if I can go do this, if I can do this strategy, imagine what I can do from an impact standpoint for this ministry that I'm so passionate about, whether I sell the business and use the proceeds to benefit them later, or if I just fuel them off of the growth and the new cash flow created through these acquisitions. He was very intentional about the why. So once we have all those things set up, he was able to share that same vision, all the tools and the profiles with his team so that they could then activate what needs to get done. Because if it's just a one-man show, guys, not much is going to get done. You need your leaders understanding what is the call of action and what you're trying to do. And again, it's very difficult to be successful as an acquirer if you don't first count the costs and make sure that we set up a firm foundation. That takes us to differentiator number 2.
All right. And number 2, we have mobilized deal flow. So obviously, if you want to start buying some businesses, you're going to need access to some deals, some opportunities for companies that are potentially for sale. So as we look at mobilizing deal flow, here's a handful of things we want to think about. First and foremost, we want to think about identifying advocates and aligned interests. So who are the people around you that are going to have access to information that could help you, come across someone who's willing to sell their business? Obviously, I'm going to state the obvious here. I'm rooting for myself. We are a good source for opportunities. We primarily represent sellers. And so if you are looking to buy a business, we would love to put deals in front of you, and our interests are aligned. We make money when we sell businesses. If you want to buy a business, that's good for us. So other people that could benefit in a similar fashion, or have a seat at the table. So think of your insurance advisors, your legal counsel, your truck dealer, someone that's going to be a trusted advisor to potential seller out there. And those people are going to benefit if you acquire a business. You're going to have more insurance premiums to write. You're going to have legal work to be done. You're going to have more trucks to buy. Those are the people that are, if they are equipped with the next part here, with your goals and the problems you're trying to solve, then they can go out and be your hands and feet trying to find those deals for you. So with the goals and problems you're trying to solve. Yeah. So sharing goals and problems. So, when we're looking at this, we're saying, hey, what's the target for your acquisition? Is it an operator with 50 trucks, 100 trucks, 200 power units, whatever that is? Is it employee drivers, owner operators? Is it a certain geographic region? Is it a certain commodity that they're hauling? And letting someone know why it is that you're looking for something like that. We're trying to grow our fleet on the West Coast. We're trying to build density in the Midwest. We are looking for a new terminal in X, Y, or Z location. Whatever that is, equip them with the messaging that is going to align with the targets you're looking for. And when you are talking about messaging, that's extremely important. So this is a real life example of how not to do this. A guy called us recently, and well-intentioned. I think he's probably a good guy, but his message was, hey, I want to buy cheap companies that are on their last leg and don't have any other options. Those are the kind of deals I want to see. Can you make that happen? And so, again, I think he's a good guy. Had he just said the same thing differently, it would be a much more compelling message, and it'd be a lot easier for me to articulate to people who are in a potential selling position what he's looking for. And it could have said something like this: hey, we're looking for legacy trucking businesses that, right now there's a lot of challenges facing the industry and it's harder to operate than ever. And I'd imagine there's some people out there that are looking for an exit, but just don't have the opportunity to do so. And with equipment rising and insurance increasing, if there is a business that needs a way out, I would love to be able to buy that business, to keep those people employed, to keep the legacy of the business intact, and to make sure that those people are cared for in the next season ahead. It's a much softer way of saying it, and it doesn't degrade the person that they're trying to acquire their business, and is something that I'm much more likely to go communicate out to people that I have conversations with. Last thing here, be grateful. I'm not your mother. I'm not here to teach you manners, but I promise you that these things go a long way. And a lot of what you're going to hear throughout this presentation is going to come back to just the basics of how to treat people. So if someone sends you an opportunity to look at a potential seller, whether it aligns with what you are looking for or not, just express some gratitude. Say, hey, thanks. That was extremely appreciated. Next time, if it could look like X, Y, or Z, that'd be great. Or, you did great. That's going to ensure that you continue to see opportunities in the future. So with that, we'll jump into differentiator number 3. And that is to establish a point person and deal screening process. So I'm going to tread lightly here and say that owners are not always the best person to represent the brand of a business. I say that with the owner of my business on the panel here with me. So I just say not always, but sometimes. So if we look at these next points here, we want to lead with the best brand ambassador. So who is it in your business that you think kind of captures the spirit of who your company is, and who can actually communicate what it is you're trying to accomplish in a way that's going to clearly connect with a potential seller? And then when you make that first contact, you want to present a professional process with timeline and identify showstoppers. And so this is something that I can't communicate. I can't hammer on enough. Just be clear with expectations from the get-go. It's super easy to walk in and just say, hey, this is what we are interested in. This is why we are interested in having this conversation with you. This is what typically takes place when we have conversations like this. We want to request information and review information for a couple of weeks. We're going to move quickly to an IOI, an initial offer, and then we're going to jump into here in a little bit. And if there's something that we don't like, we have some things that we're looking for. We're going to identify this quickly, and we're going to pass quickly just to respect everyone's time, because I know this is a big deal that you're having this conversation with me in the first place. And we just want to make sure that we're not wasting anyone's time, and that we move through this efficiently. So that is extremely helpful, just to say, hey, in a matter of weeks, this is what you can expect from our team.
Now, differentiator number 4 is something that Mr. Looney has yet to master, which is to show restraint. And what we're specifically talking about, like right now, in the last 90 days, the tenant group, we have registered more new buyers than at any time in company history. And there's lots of reasons for that. That's a separate presentation itself. What it means is that there's a ton of people out in the marketplace acquiring businesses for the first time that are probably going to be doing this in an inefficient way, this is an opportunity for you to shine. The tendency for a lot of folks, irrespective of experience, is to ask for too much too soon when it comes to exploring a possible acquisition opportunity. And the drawbacks of that and the risk are alienating a seller that's highly sensitive about sharing confidential information and just very uncomfortable with a process that's new and foreign. So what ends up happening is that you can spend a lot of time asking for a lot of information, doing nothing with it, not getting deals. Where the best differentiate themselves is that they show restraint. They understand that they don't need everything to satisfy whether or not a particular acquisition opportunity satisfies an investment thesis that they need to go apply. And so what an example of this is that we had a deal where we represent a fairly large deal, close to $20 million in EBITDA. And they had come off a very traumatic type of experience prior to hiring us, where confidentiality was breached, and they pretty much had resolved themselves to never selling, because they were just, it disrupted operations. It got people spooked. And so understandably, they reluctantly came back to the table, and we agreed to help them while accommodating making several accommodations to them and to our process to help go do that. And so we went, and what would have been a really large, exciting list of potential buyers to take this to, we kind of narrowed it down to 20, and Davis and I and the team were like, hey man, we've really knocked it out here in terms of satisfying what they want, getting this narrowed down to a manageable list that they'll accept. And it took 5 seconds. They took 14 names right off the list. They're just like, no, it's too high risk, too sensitive. There's competition there. We just can't have it. And so we're like, okay, well, at least 6. We engaged with those folks. Naturally, they started requesting information. And these were not even like atypical type information requests, pretty standard, but there was such sensitivity. They were reluctant or slow to comply. And because of that, 5 of the 6 also dropped out. One buyer stayed in and said, hey, let's just go at the pace of what the seller is comfortable with, take one thing at a time, and let's see what happens. Fast forward, what ended up happening, all the competition had effectively left. They did develop some relationship traction because of going a little bit slower at the pace that the seller was comfortable with, agreed to money. We had told the seller that if they shrunk the buyer pool dramatically, that there would be economic consequences for that. So they were eyes wide open, ultimately accepted terms on a deal that we believe were probably about $14 million lower if they had allowed us to run our standard process. But that wasn't their number one priority. They wanted this specific experience, and they felt comfortable with this buyer. The takeaway is for you watching this is that if you can show discipline and show some restraint on the front end and how you ask for information and when you ask for information, it can be a powerful differentiator that leads to better deals and that leads to you getting to the front of the line, that's half the battle. So Davis, talk to us about differentiator number 5.
Yes, make written offers and make them fast and often. So this is something that, as we alluded to earlier, if you want to make an acquisition, then first you have to see opportunities. And then once you see those opportunities, you're in the game. You still need to make some offers in order to get some deals done. And there's I don't know if you would call him an M&A guru, thought leader, but a famous person in the space who once said, if you ain't first, you're last. His name's Ricky Bobby. And he is someone we've learned a lot from over the years. We'll dive into his shake and bake methodology in a future webinar, but there's some truth here. And as we look at these next couple of points, this is a handful of reasons why this matters. Speed and efficiency are key in any deal process. So time is the number one killer of deals. And if you are a buyer to the extent that you can move a deal along efficiently, the more that you're going to be able to see the odds of success increase over time. So what being able to move quickly to an offer does is it quickly allows you to box out the competition in a lot of ways. There's a lot of times that Spencer just alluded to. Sellers will see an offer. They'll see, a buyer respectfully in our process, efficiently assess what it is they value about the business, present a range of offers, and that seller can pretty quickly get emotionally committed to that offer. And, that can box out the competition who's maybe dragging their feet, requesting excess information, and not really articulating their interest in the business. And, this was clearly shown through a relationship we had with a friend in the industry who came to us a handful of years back. Was a little frustrated. They'd been wanting to make an acquisition, but they just hadn't been able to get one done. So we said, well, are you seeing deals? Are you having access to opportunities? I said, oh yeah, like we're seeing hundreds of opportunities. And so we asked, well, how many offers have you made? Just in our head thinking maybe there's just a problem with the way they're going about making these offers. And they said, well, yeah, we haven't made any. So we're like, well, I think that's a easy place to make the first change the strategy here is we got to get you in the game. And so figuring out a way to quickly allow them to issue a non-binding offer within a range and get themselves in the game so that they can continue learning more and then move closer to a formal offer. Spencer, you want to expand on that in this IOI structure?
Yeah, so we can move on to that next slide. People make this a much bigger deal. Part of the reason why people don't make offers is because they think this is a legal function. What this is a communication function. It's what we're really trying to do. So this is a template. If you like this is not like a proprietary. This is a simple template that we use. We've offered up to buyers in the middle of our processes all the time. It's just an outline that it's kind of fill in the blank, which addresses the main sensitivity points the seller wants to know on the front end, which is number one, economically, are we in the same universe on value? Secondly, what are some characteristics of the deal structure? What's it going to look like? What's going to be the role of the owner post-transaction? And then most specifically, what's the path to close? What does it look like? Is this a matter of months? Is this a 6-month type deal? And what are your methods of closing? Who are your advisors going to be? This is a 2-page document that reads like a letter that's very friendly to whoever's receiving it. And it is tremendously powerful in helping buyers and sellers determine whether or not there's a reason to continue to lean in and do a deal. So I just encourage you, if you don't already have something like this in place, we're happy to provide it. But this helps really create the speed that Davis is talking about to get in the game. Moving on to our differentiator number 6, at some point, once you kind of satisfy either through an indication of interest, a range of offers that we're in the same universe, it's important to kind of tighten up the strategic rationale about why you're going to do this deal. And one of the ways that you do that is through a management meeting. And this is where, you've kind of pre-qualified a buyer in terms of what they're probably going to make available in an offer. You like them. And so now you're kind of looping in some of your key managers to be a part of that discussion. The buyer's interest is to help firm up the company's capabilities, growth opportunities moving forward, and then, but also how to get the deal done and who are going to be the players moving forward, how it might mesh with an existing T&L company. So all the more reason why this is very important for this to go well, because not only is it to help firm up the deal, but you're also, if it goes well, you're creating allies that are going to help propel the success of the future following the transaction. So some key ingredients here. Number one, the best of the best, but they always do. They always have a clear agenda prepared and distributed in advance to everyone that's going to be there. And it's just as important to say what you're going to talk about as what you're not going to talk about, because for most people, this is the first time they've ever done this. They might be uncomfortable. So that's the main thing. We want people that are going to provide necessary information. You want them to be comfortable. So no surprises. Set out the agenda, stick to the agenda. The next thing is just break the ice, disarm, try to get people loose. And one of the best examples of this happened recently. I was in a management team meeting and it's ice cold. Davis and I, our team, we coached up our clients and their management team. This is what's going to happen. But man, they were nervous. Whew, super nervous. And it showed. And, and everyone was kind of feeding off that energy. So very savvy buyer leans in. He said, hey, let's just pause for a minute. I have an idea here. Let's just get to know each other a little bit. So he starts this exercise called the Good News Report. And he just says, hey, let's just go around. What's the best thing that's happened to you in the last 2 weeks? Could be business, family, health, spiritual, whatever. But what is it? And so he passes it to his partner to the right of him and says, well, my best news, I just got back from a ski trip with my son. And we've been doing this for the last 5 years in a row. It's a father-son trip. It literally is the highlight of my year. We just did it. And then somebody on the seller's management team immediately reacts. He says, I think that's great. My son and I, we have a similar type of tradition when we go fishing. And I agree. It's the best. So the whole tenor in the room and the table changes. And they're able to move forward and be much more constructive about the conversation. So break the ice, disarm, get everybody loose. And the other part, like focusing on fit, it's not like you're not there to interrogate. You're trying to find out if this is a mutually beneficial and mutual fit for everybody moving forward. And when the tone is like that versus an interrogation, it matters. And I think that's one thing that the buyers at the top do very well. And then the one thing that you absolutely can't miss on is that you leave the meeting, before you walk out the door, you have to have a clear action plan. All right, this is the stuff that we identified that we didn't get complete answers on. These are the owners for rounding that up. This is when we're all going to get it. This is the date for which we believe we're going to get definitive feedback about what next steps are. And if it's some reason that we're not going to take the next step, you will know by this date. It's that clear. And when buyers do that, it provides tremendous efficiency, but also it creates allies around that table. Like, I like the way this guy operates. I mean, I could see this being a fit. And so what ends up happening over the following months is you have these people being advocates for the buyer inside the seller's camp. It's a good thing. So don't miss differentiator number 6. It's a key part of winning. Number 7, let's move there. All right, remember what they will remember. That's a mouthful. And I'll try to do this as precisely as I can. But the reality is, what we've learned from doing this for a long time, as much as it would be nice if the seller really remembered that first encounter, it's warm and fuzzy, and they're talking about how great your business is, like that's not really what the seller's likely going to remember. They're going to remember the last 60 to 90 days, which is the most grueling part of due diligence. They're being asked for hundreds of different information requests and then configured a dozen different ways each. It's brutal. And so what we've found is that the people that do this the best, they understand that, hey, we're not just about trying to close the deal. We're trying to create lifetime ambassadors that will fall into that number 2 principle of mobilizing deal flow. So an example of this is we did a deal a couple of years ago, about $100 million in annual revenue, and it was a highly successful transaction. Well, the same buyer about 18 months before did a very similar transaction. In that transaction, the due diligence, just the due diligence component of the transaction took 11 months. I don't even know how they got it done. It's crazy. And so in contrast, the second experience with our client, it took 60 days. Now, to be fair, our client was just off the charts, unbelievable in their financial reporting, and that had a lot to do with it. But I mean, think about this. Like, it's the same buyer. One had an experience with 11 months due diligence. One seller had an experience with 60 days due diligence. Do you think that they're going to advocate differently about that experience with the buyer? I do, very much so. And so I think that what we notice about the best buyers, they're aware of this and they don't miss an opportunity here. They want to demonstrate superb stewardship. They're trying to make sure that and verify that everything that they believe about the business is in fact true, but they're also using this as an opportunity to shine, to create a lasting memory, to demonstrate that they're treating the seller with respect and courtesy. And in doing so, like, they have tremendously high standards for their internal team when they're managing data rooms. They resource the deals accordingly so that they can move fast. And the result of that is this: 3 years down the road, that seller gets a call and says, "Hey, listen, I'm thinking about doing a deal with the guy that bought your company. Tell me about your experience. Would you recommend that this is a good fit?" That's what's going to happen. And so the folks that win, they anticipate that that's the conversation that they're going to win on. And so when it comes to a seller that's evaluating the execution risk between 5 different buyers, the money's the same. Who are they going to go with? They're going to go with the one that provided the best experience during the due diligence, if all things else are equal, or even not. So I'm just telling you, that is a great place to win. And that's a place that the best don't lose ever. We're getting close to the end here, David. So tell us about these last 2, which are so key.
Yep, number 8 here. So right information, right party, right time. This is something that is something we live by at the Tinny Group, but is important at every stage of the process. So, I mean, as you can imagine, if you are potentially selling your business and a buyer reaches out and says, "Hey, we'd be interested in buying it. Would you send us your full roster of customers and their contacts right off the bat?" You'd probably be like, I'm out. I'm not continuing this conversation. That's important information to get a deal done, but the timing's completely wrong. As a deal comes to a close, as you're seeing everything come together, that's really where we can practice this principle well. And the transition is obviously letting the news break to the employees of the seller's company is extremely volatile time. And important to handle well. And this is something we saw done extremely well recently with one of our former clients. So our client sold his business. As it closed the day after, he got the whole team together and he came in with the buyer and addressed the whole company as a unified front. And he said, "Hey, I wanted to bring you all here to let you know that I've decided that it's time for me to transition the business to, the person who's going to be able to steward the business best going forward. It's no longer me. And in doing so, I've talked to a bunch of people. I've prayed on this, and I found that," we'll call him John here, "John is the right person to do so. And so I wanted to introduce you all to him and allow him to say something." And when John stood up there, the first thing he said is, I own you guys and you're in a lot of trouble now. Just kidding. That is not what he said. Is it right information at the right time was to say, hey, we think that you guys are doing a lot of really good work here. And that's what brought us interest in making the purchase of this business in the first place. And so we're really excited to get to work with you going forward. We're going to do our best to provide you with more tools and more opportunity to be successful going forward. And as the next 2 weeks unfold, we'll be getting with you all individually just to provide more information. But want to let you know that your jobs aren't in trouble, and we're excited to go to work together going forward. Just that little bit of communication to try to address anyone's potential fears, and to do that on a united front, extremely impactful and mitigates the transition risk exponentially right off the bat. So again, who are we addressing with what information, and is now the right time? Had they gone and started interviewing those employees months before the close, that would have blown up the deal. That would have been very problematic. So right information, right party, right time. Let's look at the final one here, number 9. Being Nashville folks, it's impossible for us to do a presentation without working in some sort of country lyric or title. So we have always be humble and kind here. Anyone who's met Charles Tenney in person over the years can see that clearly he had a big impact on Tim McGraw's style in the early 90s. And he's still doing his job to carry that mantle today. This is something that, again, it's not rocket science, all the stuff that we're talking about. It's manners. It's how you treat people. It's, doing the right thing the right way. But Spencer, as we kind of close this out, you want to expand on this?
Yeah, I would point to somebody who we've done a ton of deals with. There's one buyer that over a 15-year period, we did 12 deals just with them. And that doesn't even include all of the other deals that they did with other parties during that time. And there was a very specific characteristic about this buyer that I attribute to how we were so prolific in our relationship. And again, we represented 12 different sellers with that relationship. And so the difference was, and he passed on a lot of deals too, but the difference was this: when we reached an impasse and it didn't look like there was anywhere to go, the buyer would say, hey, Spencer, listen, I don't get it. I mean, I want to get it, but I don't. I don't see the strategic rationale for this deal. I don't understand the investment thesis. And I surely don't understand why the seller's asking for what he's asking. But if you can show me how I can make money, I'll consider it. And it's that posture of humility and open-mindedness that led to a run of tremendous deal making over that period. And I think that without question, the folks that are doing the most transacting have that type of posture. The most success, they bring humility that is extremely uncommon. And the next thing that they do is that they're kind. There's no reason to not be kind. There's so much upside. So when there's not a fit, in which many cases it shouldn't be a fit. And if it's not a fit, you don't do the deal. But this is how you leave it. And the best never miss this opportunity. They always leave the door open with kindness. They'll say, hey, listen, I don't really see the fit today. However, I am really enjoying the relationship that we're forming here. It's great. So if it's all right with you, I would love to revisit this. Should the business change, or maybe something changes with our strategy? Would you be open to that? I've never, ever heard a seller not respond favorably to that type of request. And what happens is this: over the next 2, 3, 4 years, as goals and as life changes, and that seller says, you know what, I think I would like to sell. He doesn't call 5 or 6 different people. He goes and calls that one person that showed respect, showed humility, and also asks for the call. And that one thing multiplies the quality at bats for the very, very best of the buyers. And again, we keep coming back to these same things in terms of that's how when they get back in discussion, they're not in a competition. It's just a one-to-one deal, and they're trying to bridge that gap together, which leads to a lot of success. So that's it. Those are our 9 differentiators. And as we've talked about, it's not rocket science, but I'm telling you this: these are things that are actionable today. These are things that you can begin to deploy. And in this environment, it's really an opportunity to reimagine what you can do with your business, how you can grow and how you can impact. So my encouragement is this: apply these 9 things, get into the game, keep it simple, and you will do amazing things. We're going to open it up for some Q&A in just a moment, but Davis, for those that aren't familiar with Tinny Group or not as familiar with Tinny Group, could you give us just a quick rundown, Davis?
Yeah, alluded to this at the beginning. So Tinny Group, 100% focused on trucking logistics M&A. Over the last 50 years, we've developed a proven process that's allowed us to be successful for a multitude of sellers. And in the process of doing that, we've developed relationships with buyers across the industry. So between Spencer and myself, we'll probably get to 30 different trucking logistics conferences this year. Across the 17 deals that we're running right now, we're having multiple conversations with buyers on every one of those. And so if you're a buyer that's looking to make an acquisition in the future, reach out to us, let us know what it is you're looking for. We'd love to get deals in front of you in the future. Or if you're a seller looking to exit, we would always be happy to have that conversation as well. So with that, I'll get off my soapbox and we'll open up to some questions. And we do have this white paper here that you can scan the QR code and get a little information on.
Well, Spencer and Davis, that was great. A fun way to wrap this up. You had us chuckling over on this side, but also paying attention and some really great life lessons, gratitude being one of them. And also the philosophy from Ricky Bobby. I think everybody can relate to that for sure. A couple things we wanted to touch on. Could you walk us through kind of what a normal trajectory of a deal looks like in terms of time frame and major benchmarks?
Yeah, I would say that for us, it typically, if we're bringing a seller to market, 30 days from the time we sign a contract, more or less, until we dive in, get the company prepared to go to market, put a marketing materials together, put our buyer list together, then start reaching out to buyers. So as a buyer, you're getting that information once our team has already taken, a deep dive into understanding the financials and the operations of the business. And if we're reaching out to you, it's because we've kind of pre-vetted that based on, as I alluded to in the presentation there, based on the geography, the trailer type hauled, the length of haul, the driver mix, whatever that is, that it's going to make sense with the buyer that's receiving the information on some level based on what they've articulated that they're looking to acquire. From there, I would imagine pre-LOI anywhere from 30 to 60 days most of the time, as we send information out to buyers, allow them to review it, to have a look at the marketing materials, to have a management call, to send the initial the IOI, indication of interest, and then ultimately have an LOI in place within hopefully 60 days. As a buyer, if you are in a process that isn't competitive, there's probably potential to go faster or slower than that. From where we sit on the seller side, we're trying to command multiple offers and just make sure that everyone that's serious about the deal has an opportunity to get a bid in. And then from there, diligence is probably the next phase that can take anywhere from 30 to 90 days, depending on the complexity of the business and the diligence required from the buyer. And then purchase price agreement and kind of working capital negotiations to close it out typically take another 30 days at the end. Spencer, anything that you would add to that?
No, I think that's part of it, the timeline is kind of like to your snowflake comment, Hal. I think some of that just depends on the uniqueness of the business and what buyer pool is available to that. But some of it is largely dependent. If you've heard any of our other seminars, it's largely dependent on the seller's preparation and available of quality information to support the sale. I think that if we're talking to sellers, I think that the best thing that you can do to expedite, which, could be a 7 to 9 month process or longer, largely you control that timeline based on being prepared with quality of information and making sure that, you're ready for prime time.
Yeah, that actually makes me think of some of what you touched on last year in the series we did last year, because I think you had a couple of great sessions, the one on succession planning and the one on adding multiples to your company's value, really about getting your house in order just to have a better operating business, but also it sets you up for, what the future brings. So you're prepared, and you never know. I think you had a couple of examples of life-changing events that kind of spring upon folks that, if you're not prepared, you may not come out of it as well as you had hoped. I would definitely encourage folks to go onto the IANA's website, intermodal.org, go to Education on Demand, and then you can go back in the sessions that we did with Spencer and Davis and the folks at Tenny Group. I think really tie in there too, because I think it makes a really nice trajectory. One of the questions that came up is, could you talk a little bit about the differences in the process between a merger and an acquisition? We spent a lot of time talking primarily about acquisitions, but in terms of mergers, how different are they?
They're very different. I mean, I think the main difference I would say is the PR around it. I think that the optics, I think sometimes are presented to the public and to the industry that it is a merger, when in fact it's really an acquisition. One person, the companies are maybe have independent brands still, or maybe they're the same brand, but the vast majority of deals are not true mergers, because mergers are very difficult. What you require are extremely compatible cultures and just philosophies from a leadership team. There has to be compatibility there, because if you're trying to merge founders and you're trying to say, like, you guys are going to co-manage the business moving forward, it's very difficult to kind of marry up the right ingredients for that to take place. Now, it does happen, but I wouldn't just assume because if it is positioned as a merger that it truly is a merger. I think that what we'll see in the coming year, perhaps, if there are stronger headwinds from an economic standpoint, I think there could be the possibility for folks to merge. I think the great thing about where we are as an industry right now is that there's a very receptive attitude to reinvention and innovation. So whatever it takes to get an additional competitive edge, I think everyone needs to be thinking about that right now. The realities are acquisitions tend to be more practical than a true merger, but I think that we will see more mergers if, in fact, the economic headwinds persist, as some project that they will.
That makes a lot of sense. And that reminds me of something somebody told me once about when anybody announces that a company's going to have dual CEOs. watch this space.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that you primarily work in the motor carrier space, but I also know that you have done work in the 3PL logistics space as well. Are you seeing more interest in folks kind of growing their businesses through acquisition into those kind of making side acquisitions, as opposed to a motor carrier just simply purchasing, other motor carriers? Are you seeing things like them looking at logistics companies or warehousing companies or things like that?
Yeah, I think Davis has a really good lens on this. Davis, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, we've sold 2 brokerages to trucking companies this year. So it's been strategics, but not brokerage buyers on either one of those. So I definitely have had more conversations lately with people looking to diversify as a motivation. Obviously, I think there's a big push from strategic carriers, asset heavy carriers, into the brokerage space to optimize their fleet. On the other hand, we are seeing more brokerages looking for some fleets to purchase, just because shippers are requiring more and more that they're an asset-based brokerage, and that typically needs to mean more than just having a truck parked in the parking lot. And so actually having some access to capacity, and a lot of brokers we're talking to have seen just the value of being able to flex up and down with that to serve the customers as needed. So with 3PL space at large, there's still a significant amount of activity. We had a deal go under contract last week or two that I think had 8 offers on it in the brokerage space. So, and that's coming from everywhere from strategic buyers to private equity backed strategic buyers to private equity groups looking for a platform.
That's great info. It's an exciting time to be in the business for sure. Just seeing all of the creative ways folks are taking their businesses, and there's no lack of business, but there's also no lack of challenges. So I think it's getting more and more interested from our side at the association We have a motor carrier division and a 3PL division. And, more and more when we have members either merge or new members come in that are it's almost a third entity. Sometimes we call them multimodals because they're a motor carrier that does 3PL activities or vice versa, and they're kind of morphing into these really interesting creatures that are kind of optimizing their ability to save customers time and money and optimize the efficiency of the supply chain. I've thoroughly enjoyed this series. Head over to intermodal.org. You can find all of these, as well as the 4 that we did in 2021 under Education on Demand. I would also encourage you to head over to the TENI Group's website because that white paper that they mentioned is fantastic, a great read, as well as that offer sheet is terrific. I think that in and of itself is sort of a class, right? You can just show that and say, this is how you do it. With that, I'm going to say thank you so much to Spencer and Davis for spending the year with us. I will say thank you to all of the folks that have attended all of our webinars, and stay tuned for info on the 2023 program coming up soon. But with that, I will leave you with our appreciation from Ayanna, the moving force behind intermodal freight.